Oh, very nice.
Oh, hello, Mr. Lai. Hi, Nikhil.
Hello, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, I have the pleasure of knowing you. Why don't you tell our guests, our audience, those viewing, those watching, who my special friend is that is here today to be on the OhHello podcast and podcast?
I am Nikhil Lai. As you mentioned, I recently moved to West Hollywood, California,
From where?
from West Chelsea in Manhattan. I lived on the High Line with my then girlfriend, now fiance. Now we live pretty close to Runyon Canyon. So going from one naturally beautiful place to another, all of this one has much less concrete. I work for Forrester Research. I'm the senior analyst for performance marketing. So I do a bunch of channel-specific research on TV and search and social and out of home, as well as sector-level research about where the market's going.
What a fun job.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It is like the most satisfied I've ever been professionally, which is saying something because I've worked for you before, and that was very satisfying.
Worked with.
Worked with you before. And yeah, I came to Forrester after a stint in Marpipe. We evangelized automated multivariate creative testing, and I still believe sincerely in that idea and in that concept. I worked at Simul Media for 2 non-consecutive stints, first
Great company.
evangelizing TV advertising for direct-to-consumer companies who'd never before been on TV, then selling the product that I helped evangelize. In between, I went to grad school in London and got a master's in history, government, and law, worked in parliament. And I began my career at General Electric, where my mom worked in the late 80s. And I grew up at the kitchen table, literally at the kitchen table, dreaming of working for GE one day. So that was a dream come true. And so I've had, that's my path to where I am today. Everyone has a very circuitous path, and I've been really lucky in my case to be really standing on the shoulders of some giants. And so that's who I am.
Amazing. So you're at Forrester. You had an amazing run at a couple different ad tech companies, at one of the biggest companies being GE, and then moved west. And now you're with your fiance, Mary Grace. With that said, Mr. Lai, what defines you? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and just what's important to you.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed in the last few years that the curiosity I have about other people and about what defines them, about how they make decisions, about how they represent themselves, that curiosity about others has been something that I've had for my entire life. I remember as a kid in kindergarten talking to other kids about how they chose to play the sports they chose to play and how they chose to love certain subjects over others. And that curiosity, I think, has been defining of my life and of my career as well. And so it's really been special to be at Forrester, where I'm surrounded by so many other intellectually curious people. And I mean that sincerely. It kind of reminds me of being in grad school or being an undergrad at Wesleyan. So that curiosity, I think, has been the golden thread throughout.
Yeah, you have an innate curiosity. The fact that you went to Wesleyan, you went and got your master's at the London School of Economics, and you worked for British Parliament, which is a really unique experience. Your curiosity and the way that you just want to consistently know what's happening and just peeling back every layer of the onion, I've always respected it. I think our audience will respect it. Help us understand some areas that you find intriguing right now within MarTech, within media, within software, within tech.
Sure. Yeah, one of the most intriguing areas is the area that you and I worked on at Marpipe, which I would broadly call creative ad tech, is how we've defined the category at Forrester. And that encompasses vendors who are automating the creative process. It encompasses vendors who are providing intelligence about how creative performs and why one ad is winning over the other. And it's a category that has been fueled, I think, by fears about what's happening to audience signals, third-party audience signals that marketers have relied on for decades and decades and decades. And so I'm really curious to see and make a call about where the creative ad tech market is going, who's going to win, who's going to lose, why, how brands, agencies, and vendors can adapt to the future that I'm going to call. So I'm really curious about that space. And in fact, I'm kicking off a report this week at Forrester
Amazing.
about ad creative in the era of data deprecation is the very tentative title. And I'm excited to see what comes of that research.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to do a separate pod with you at another time to really geek out about this and get deeper. Turning the page and going back a little bit more on mentorship, on career guidance, on advice that you would give to others. Why don't we can you talk a little bit more about just your skill set? Obviously, we know that you're a curious individual, but understanding your skill set and just what excites you about mentorship? What excites you about what we're building at OhHello?
Yeah. What excites me most being a student of history is how timeless this experience is. And I mean, one of the biggest things the history that I was researching in grad school and even in undergrad was about this idea of European exceptionalism. And the question I was asking is, why did some countries like the UK and the Netherlands and Spain and France and Portugal, why did they literally outperform others in Europe and others in the rest of the world for a couple hundred years? And I think that, we are who we are today because of what those countries did. Not to be too Eurocentric, but that's one reading of the past. And when you look into the archives, one of the biggest differences are the structures of mentorship and structures of apprenticeship that those countries had, that they institutionalized, and they were able to encourage young men and women to work as hard as they could to get to certain ranks in the military, for example, or to get in certain ranks in like a guild of potters or weavers because of that apprenticeship and because of the strength of it. And so I think what you're doing is in a way timeless and is consistent with what has worked for the last, since the dawn of man. And other solutions that are out there, I think, are seeking problems, and they're very much tied to the flavor of the month, whether that may be AI one month or ML next month. And what is happening here, I think, is not dependent on the current moment so much as it is just dependent on like how the human condition evolves. And so I appreciate the historical durability of it.
I appreciate that. I respect that. And my AP European high school teacher would have appreciated you saying that as well. Nonetheless, and I'm glad that you remembered all those details because, I've got a decade plus on you where I don't remember each detail. With that said,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell your peer set? What kind of guidance would you provide?
Yeah, I would tell my peer set and my younger self to pay attention to labels and what they connote, but be aware of how confining labels are as much as they are defining. And I was so caught up. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut, about 45 minutes outside of New York City, very preppy community, very waspy community. There's some unsavory parts of Darien's past. It's a sundown town. There, there's a history of anti-Semitism there that the town is still reckoning with. Point being, the town is very focused on, and it made me who I am today, and I'm grateful, to death for that town. But it's very focused on labels. It's very focused on what a certain brand of car connotes about your status, what a certain logo on a shirt might connote about how valuable you can be socially. And so I was conditioned by that for a long time. And I thought that my success meant, literally, I had an iPhone note that I wrote when I was in high school. I was like, I have to buy a Lamborghini. Like my life is going to be worthless unless
Not a Maserati, not a Ferrari.
Yeah,
not a Toyota, not a Ford.
It has to be Lamborghini. I have to go to certain schools. I have to work for certain companies. And that's the yellow brick road. Like, why would anyone want to do anything else? And I guess I had to think like that to know now that way of thinking is very self-limiting and very self-sabotaging in a way. And so I would advise my peer set and my younger self to be uncritically curious and literally open-minded. Because you can make all the plans you want for what's going to happen, and most likely those plans are not going to come true. Sometimes they are, but most likely they're not going to come true. Man proposes and God disposes, my mom always told me. And so
your
man
your mom gave you the guidance that man proposes and
and
God disposes.
God disposes of the plans that you propose, right?
Love that.
And
Wow.
so I may or may not buy a Lamborghini one day. I may or may not. I mean, I didn't go to certain schools. I did go to certain schools. The point being, that's not defining. It's really confining. And so I wish I'd learned that earlier, but here I am as a 30-year-old, and I'm glad to have that semblance of clarity now.
Well, that's a lot of clarity. It's great guidance and advice to those that are watching and listening. Who were some of your top professional mentors and/or personal mentors?
Yeah. My first mentor was and is my mom, who worked for GE Capital in the late 80s. And that's why my first job out of Wesleyan was at GE Capital, because I just thought that was the best place to be trained in corporate America. And my dad, too. I mean, I've always admired the ways in which they both moved to the New York City area in the mid 80s. They both grew up in India. And I always just admired the way in which they were able to put their head down, work really hard, seemingly not get distracted by labels, for example, or by what other people wanted of them, and just really be the best versions of themselves. So the mentorship, I think, really began there. My sister
Right.
worked for Forrester. She, frankly, pulled me in to Forrester and referred me to the interview process. So I'm eternally grateful for that. And she mentored me in terms of what it means to, be a good Forrester analyst. And then the founders of the companies that I've worked for, including you, including Dave Morgan at Sell
Thank you, sir.
Media, and including the outgoing CEO of GE, Jeff Immelt, and some of his lieutenants. The CFO of GE, Keith Saran, was a great mentor to me. And so I've just always paid close attention to how people like you and them, carry themselves and treat others, and tried to learn from them.
Well, that's very sweet. Thank you very much for mentioning my name with
Of
Dave
course,
Morgan and some other folks that you've worked with.
of
I
course,
genuinely appreciate that, my friend.
yeah, I mean it.
Thank you. I was not expecting that, but thank you. As you know, as OhHello, you're going to be able to donate to a myriad of different charities that are pumped into our platform. What is a cause that's near and dear to you? It doesn't have to be one that's in
Yeah,
our platform. Just
yeah,
something that's important to you.
yeah. One of the causes that's always been dear to me, that I noticed at a pretty young age, is the cause of girls' education in India. And there are a lot of, I mean, most Indians are Hindu, and there are a lot of rituals in Hinduism and stereotypes that girls are lesser than, and that girls have inferior capacity. And I've always disliked that aspect of some of the dogma, and the religion is actively working on expunging itself of that dogma. But I think that girls in India, each and every one of them, has enormous potential, and I want to do anything that I can to help them realize that.
Amazing. Well, Nikhil, this has been great. I know that you have to jump to your next meeting. I appreciate you.
Of
Everyone
course,
watching, thank you, Nikhil Lai. Thank you, my friend. Thanks, everyone.
Jeremy,
Thanks for coming on the pod, Nikhil. We will talk soon and excited for the next one.
sounds good. Thanks, man.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.